Okay, so guys, today I am going to be reading A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. A Bad Case of Stripes. Camellia Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them all. Of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried. "You're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Carmella's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Carmella answered. "But just look at me." "You get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered you. "You're not going to school today." Carmella was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. Just like a zebra. Pretty snazzy. Okay. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Carmella. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. He exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Carmella told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Miss Cream, "I don't see any reason why she couldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. Looks like the doctor's getting involved. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Carmella. They called her Carmella Crayon. And Night of the Living Lollipop, she tried her best to act as if everything was normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripe turned red, white, and blue. She broke out in stars. "To America!" Okay. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Carmella turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard! Checkerboard!" And a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Carmella was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. Someone's getting picked on. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Miss Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Carmela home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious." Carmela was so embarrassed she could not believe that too. Days ago, everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Carmela. What she really was wanting was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Okay, so I'm going to take a break for 1 minute. I will place this right here. 1 second. Let me adjust this so you can read it if you want. There. So you can see the book. Okay, let's keep reading. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled. When Mr. Cream phoned the next day, "I think I'd better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialist went to work on Carmela. They squeezed and jabbed and tabbed and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grop. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not the chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one before bed," said Dr. Grop. Then they filled out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. Close my window so it's not there. Okay. That night, Carmela took her medicine. It was awful when she woke up the next morning. She did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant multicolored pill with her face on it. Did a demon take her face off and put it on a giant pill? What? Okay, let's move on. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. and Mr. Cream called, but this time, instead of specialists, he bought the experts. Dr. Gord and Dr. Mellon were the finest scientist minds in the land. Once again, Carmela was poked and prodded, looked at, and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. It might be a virus, he announced. With authority, suddenly fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Carmela. Or possibly some sort of bacteria, said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be fungus, added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Carmela was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Carmela, then at each other. We need to go over these numbers again. Back at the lab, Dr. Gord explained. We'll call you when we know something, but the experts didn't have a clue, much less a clue. By now, the TV news had found out about Carmela. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon a whole crowd was camped out on the front lawn. Okay. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of rudiments from physiologist. Don't boo me if I get this wrong. Physiologist, allergist, herbologist, neutronologist, physicist, and an old medic man. A GRU, and even veteran, each also called Kerr. Only added to poor Carmela's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. She got a problem. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she would cure Carmela. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Carmela groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. and Mr. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. Uh-oh. Let's see what she got. Okay. She went into Carmela's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said. These might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mr. and Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I'll bet you'd like some, wouldn't you? She asked Carmela. Carmela wanted a big, heaping plate full of lima beans. More. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and she started towards the door. Carmela watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. Wait, she cried. The truth? I really love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans, popped them into Carmela's mouth. Said Carmela. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Carmela, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there. Somewhere she patted Carmela on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Carmela wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of stripes again. So that's the end. I hope you enjoyed the book. Again, A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. I hope you had a good time reading this with me. Bye.